I wasn't supposed to be home that early. That Friday had a meeting scheduled in Dallas, a quarterly pitch for a new contract that had taken weeks to prepare. I'd been bracing for the usual routine 2-hour drive, endless slide decks, and late-night takeout at some sterile hotel chain. But at around noon I got a call. The client's CEO had fallen ill. Everything was postponed until next week. My first thought wasn't disappointment or relief. It was her. Rachel. I texted her a casual meeting got bumped. Home early tonight. But she didn't reply. That wasn't unusual. She was a yoga instructor and had classes stacked on Fridays. Still, I remember thinking she'd usually at least heart it or hit me with a yay. I left the office early anyway and made a detour on the way home. Picked up her favorite udon from that tiny spot in Oak Cliff and a bottle of premium sake she only brought out on her birthday. I had this image in my head of us kicking off the weekend together, quiet night in, maybe even sitting out on the porch with the lights dimmed and the crickets starting to hum. Instead, I pulled into our driveway and saw a stranger's SUV parked outside our house. That was the first crack in the picture I had painted in my mind. It wasn't flashy, no vanity plates, no ridiculous rims. Just a dark gray midsize SUV, spotless, almost too clean, like it had just been detailed. I slowed my truck as I pulled in behind it and checked the plates. Texas tags, nothing out of the ordinary. Still, my gut turned. I sat there a second longer than I usually would have, keys still in the ignition, my grip tightening slightly. I scanned the house, curtains mostly drawn, the porch light already on despite it still being daylight. That was odd. Rachel never turned that light on until just before bed. IK** led the engine. As I stepped onto the walkway, the front door opened, and that's when he walked out. Tall, athletic, maybe 6'2", early 30s, clean-shaven, confident stride. He wore gym shorts, a moisture-wicking shirt, and carried a duffel bag over one shoulder like he'd just left a CrossFit class. He didn't flinch when he saw me, didn't say hello, just gave me a tight-lipped glance. Half acknowledgement, half dismissal, and brushed past me on the steps. I turned to watch him head to the SUV. I didn't say a word, and neither did he, but it was his hand that stopped me cold. He reached for the door handle, and the light caught the ring on his left hand. It was slim, matte titanium, with a brushed pattern I could spot from 10 feet away. I knew that ring. I knew it the way I knew the veins on the back of my own hands. It was a match to the custom set I had made for Rachel and me for our 5th anniversary. She'd picked the style, clean, minimalist, meant to represent stillness and strength. Her words. And now it was on this stranger's finger. I stood frozen on the front step, a to-go bag in one hand and a bottle of sake in the other, as he climbed into his SUV and drove off without looking back. I stayed there, watching the taillights vanish down the road. No horn, no glance in the rear view, just gone. Then I turned the doorknob and walked inside. The air inside our home felt off. The kind of stillness that isn't peaceful. The kind that feels vacuum-sealed, like the room had been rapidly cleaned and staged in the 30 seconds between him leaving and me walking in. Rachel was in the living room, hair down, dressed in yoga leggings and a soft tee, barefoot. She had a yoga mat rolled up beside her and a diffuser puffing out a thin stream of lavender mist. "Hey babe," she said, far too lightly. Her tone made my skin crawl. That was Jason, from my Wednesday meditation group. He stopped by to return a book. I hadn't said a word yet. My hand was still on the doorknob. "Meeting get canceled?" she added, voice breezy. "You should have told me earlier. I would have made dinner." I didn't respond right away. I just walked inside, placed the food and the bottle on the kitchen counter, and turned to face her. She was standing with one foot slightly behind the other, like she'd posed for a magazine shoot. Her hands were clasped in front of her, fingers interlocked. Her face was calm, too calm, like she'd practiced this exact posture in the mirror. "What book?" I asked. My voice didn't even sound like mine. She blinked once. "The one on Zen breathing techniques. I told you I lent it to him a few weeks ago." I said nothing. Her gaze didn't flicker. Not yet, but I noticed the little things. Her phone face down on the coffee table. The window cracked open behind her, though the AC was running, and a faint, unfamiliar cologne scent mixed with the lavender in the air. He was just in the area. Popped by real quick. I didn't think you'd mind. I gave a small nod, walked over, and picked up the bottle again. He wearing a wedding ring? I asked. There was the flicker. The half-second stutter of the eyelid, the faint shift in her stance. I don't think so, she said slowly, like she was still calculating how much I'd seen. I wasn't really paying attention. Maybe he's married. I looked her dead in the eyes. It looked just like yours. Our anniversary set. She didn't speak. The silence between us stretched long and heavy, filling every inch of the room like fog. Finally, she gave a light shrug. A lot of rings look like that, babe. You said it yourself, it's a minimalist design. Probably just a coincidence. But it wasn't a coincidence. And we both knew it. I stood there, holding the food, sake still cold, while the evening I'd envisioned slowly collapsed like a paper house in a storm. Rachel moved toward the kitchen, probably hoping to pivot. I can heat this up, she offered, reaching for the takeout bag like nothing had happened. You got the spicy one I like? I didn't stop her. I let her go through the motions, opening the microwave, unpacking containers, fiddling with utensils like this was any other night. But I wasn't in the room anymore. My mind was on the SUV. On the flash of that ring. On the practiced calm in her voice, the deliberate rhythm in her explanation. It was too neat. Too composed. I knew Rachel. I knew how she scrambled when something unexpected happened, how she'd bite her thumbnail or nervously twist her hair. But none of that happened. She had been ready for this. She didn't ask why I was home early. She didn't act surprised. Her whole tone was that of someone who knew she had 30 seconds to get her story straight and had been mentally rehearsing it for weeks. I didn't call her out. Not yet. Instead, I played along. I sipped the sake. I made a joke about the rice being overcooked. She laughed a little too loud. I watched her eyes every time her phone buzzed, how she'd glance at it and then flip it over. And with every minute that passed, I felt something inside me quietly start to fracture. That night, after she fell asleep on the couch during a rerun of some renovation show, I sat at the edge of the bed and stared at the closet. Half her wardrobe was still hanging there, organized by color, soft-scented with her perfume. The hoodie she'd borrowed from a friend a week ago was draped over the chair. I stood up, walked to the closet, and opened the drawer where we kept our old keepsakes. Anniversary cards. Movie tickets. The note she wrote me the day we moved into this house. And I just stared. I didn't need hard evidence. Not yet. Because something had already shifted in the foundation of my reality. It was subtle. Not a scream. Not a blowout. Just the way she stood a little too still. The way her voice didn't crack under pressure. The absence of natural surprise. It was everything I hadn't wanted to admit until now, condensed into a single moment. The kind of moment you don't forget. The kind of moment that tells you everything without saying a word. You ever look back and realize the red flags weren't waving, they were on fire? It's funny how hindsight sharpens the focus. When you're in the thick of a relationship, especially a marriage, you get used to letting things slide. You call it giving space or not being paranoid. You convince yourself that trust means not questioning every weird moment. And that's exactly what I did. For months. But after that night, the SUV, the ring, the well-rehearsed story, I couldn't unsee what I had been willfully ignoring. Rachel had been different for a while. It started gradually in ways that were easy to excuse. She got busier. Her yoga classes extended later into the evening. She said she was offering private sessions now, which made sense. She's good at what she does. People respond to her calm voice and centered energy. But what didn't make sense was how suddenly those sessions were booked at odd hours, Sunday mornings, Thursday nights. And always in places that had no record, no paper trail. I'd ask which client, and she'd say something vague like, oh, just a new referral. At first, I chalked it up to her being independent, ambitious. I didn't want to be that guy, the jealous husband who couldn't handle his wife having a life outside of him. But it wasn't just her schedule. Her phone habits changed too. We used to be pretty open about everything. Her phone would buzz during dinner and she'd casually pick it up, even read me her group chats out loud if something was funny. Yeah? She'd glance at it, flip it over, and keep her hand resting on top like it might jump up and confess something on its own. One night, I reached for her phone by habit when mine died, just to check the time, and she practically dove across the couch. I'm in the middle of something, she snapped, snatching it from my hand. Private messages. I remember blinking, stunned. It's just the clock. Still, she said, tone clipped. I don't go through your phone. And she didn't. But I'd never given her a reason to. She also stopped syncing our calendars. Used to be, we had everything in one shared Google Calendar, appointments, birthdays, even the stupid Taco Tuesday nights she insisted we block off. But that stopped suddenly. I'd open the app and see empty weeks on her end, even though she claimed she was swamped. "Oh, I switched to a paper planner," she told me. "Helps me stay grounded." That didn't sound like her. Rachel was many things, but analog wasn't one of them. Then there was the hoodie. It showed up in our laundry basket one night, dark gray, oversized, and definitely not mine. I pulled it out confused and held it up like it might explain itself. "Whose is this?" I asked when she walked in. She barely looked up. "Oh, that must be Claire's. I borrowed it at her place last week. We went for a walk after class and it got cold." I nodded. Another perfectly ordinary explanation. Except Claire, her best friend since college, is 5'2" and probably weighs 90 pounds soaking wet. That hoodie would fit her like a tent. Still, I let it slide. A few days later, I saw Rachel wearing it again. She was curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone, the sleeves covering her hands. She noticed me looking and smiled, tugging the hoodie down like it was a blanket. "Comfy," she said. "Think I'm keeping it." That was her thing, a charm over clarity. Another time, we were supposed to have dinner with her sister, Mia. Last minute, Rachel told me she'd be going solo. She had something she wanted to talk to me about, girl stuff. "You know." "Sure," I said. "Tell her I said hi." 2 days later, Mia called me about something totally unrelated. I mentioned the dinner, just small talk. There was a pause. "We haven't seen each other in weeks," Mia said. I don't even remember what excuse I came up with. I was too busy trying to make my heart slow down. From that point on, I started noticing more. Like the way she'd start conversations and then let them trail off if I didn't respond with the right level of interest. Or how she'd step outside to take calls even if we were in the middle of dinner. She'd laugh quietly, then come back in and pretend nothing happened. The worst part? I was still trying to believe her. That's what people don't talk about enough, the part where you almost want to be wrong. You want to find some completely harmless explanation, something boring and unromantic, so you can go back to not questioning the woman you wake up next to every morning. But the patterns kept coming. And after a while, they stopped feeling like coincidences. There was one night in particular that stuck with me. She had a class that supposedly ended at 8:30. She didn't get home until after 10. She claimed she had stayed back to help a student with a pose. Said the woman had back issues, needed hands-on guidance. Rachel is a good instructor. Caring. Patient. But when she walked through the door that night, she wasn't wearing the same clothes she'd left in. She had changed into a fresh pair of leggings and a loose sweater that smelled faintly like cologne, not her perfume, not mine, and definitely not lavender oil. "You change at the studio?" I asked. She didn't even blink. "Yeah." I was sweaty. I didn't ask anything else. But I remembered that sweater. I had never seen it before. Then there were the texts, nothing blatant, nothing that screamed affair, but always vague. And always too quick. She used to text with typos, emojis, shorthand. But recently every reply felt like it had gone through an internal editor first. Like she was writing not to respond, but to reassure. One Friday night, I watched her from the kitchen while she stood at the window, phone in hand. She was smiling, not the kind of smile you give your husband, but the kind you give when your stomach flips from someone else's attention. She saw me watching, and in a heartbeat, her expression flattened. "Just a meme from Mia," she said. "Total nonsense." She turned the screen toward me for a split second. The notification was already cleared. I nodded. What else was I supposed to do? I could feel myself becoming someone I didn't want to be. Suspicious. Quiet. Constantly second-guessing. I started noticing how her mood would shift after certain calls, brighter, more playful. Like the version of her that used to only be for me had been exported elsewhere. And still, I waited. Waited for something clear, something I couldn't explain away. It came a few days later. I had a dentist appointment and came home around 3 p.m. Rachel didn't expect me. I walked in and heard music playing upstairs. Not her usual yoga mix, something low and rhythmic, more R&B than chanting bowls. I called her name and she didn't answer. I went up quietly. The bedroom door was open. She was on the phone, back turned, pacing slightly. "I told you, I'll see you next week," she was saying. "No, not here. He's been coming home early lately." "I know. Just be patient." Her voice was soft, almost gentle. Then silence. She was listening. I stepped back, went downstairs without her noticing, and made noise coming in again, slammed the door, called her name loudly. She came down a minute later, smile already in place. "You're home early again," she said, kissing my cheek. "Everything okay?" I looked at her closely. "Yeah," I said. Just didn't feel like going back to work after the dentist. She nodded. Makes sense. You want tea? Sure. And we went about our day like nothing had happened. But something had. It wasn't just the behavior anymore. It was the language. The code. The concealment. It was the fact that I was no longer imagining it. I was living it. And I had a choice to make: pretend I didn't hear what I heard, didn't notice the patterns. Or face it. No more giving her the benefit of the doubt. No more pretending. The woman I married had been drifting away in pieces. And now I was finally starting to see where she'd gone. There's a moment, somewhere between doubt and devastation, where you stop wondering and start needing to know. That's where I was. I didn't want to play detective. I didn't want to track my wife like she was a suspect in some crime drama. But when someone you love looks you in the eye and lies again and again, you start to realize that the version of them in your head doesn't match the one standing in front of you. I needed the truth. Not just hints. Not just gut feelings. The truth. So I did what I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator. His name was Alan. I found him through a quiet referral from a buddy at work, someone who'd been through something similar but never talked about it until I hinted that I might be heading down the same road. Alan was older, maybe late 50s, with the kind of expression that said he'd seen it all and didn't get surprised by much anymore. He met me in a small office above a pawn shop on the edge of town. No frills. Just 2 chairs, a desk, and a locked file cabinet. Tell me what you need, he said, folding his hands over a yellow legal pad. I told him everything. About the SUV. The ring. The late nights. The phone calls that stopped the moment I entered a room. I even mentioned the hoodie and the strange cologne. He nodded, jotting down a few things, not asking much. When I was done, he said something that stuck with me. You're not crazy, he said. You're early. Most people don't call me until after everything's burned down. I paid him a deposit and left with a hollow feeling in my chest, like I had just opened a door I wouldn't be able to close again. 1 week later, the report was ready. He handed it to me in a plain manila envelope. I drove home, locked myself in the study, and opened it with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The first photo was from a gym, not the one Rachel normally taught at, but a high-end place across town. She and the man from the SUV, Alan had identified him as Brandon Myers, were walking out together. She was in leggings and a sports bra. He was shirtless, a towel draped over his neck. They were laughing. Close. Comfortable. The next few photos showed more of the same: coffee shops, late lunches, trips to a hiking trail I didn't even know she liked. She always told me she hated bugs. But there she was, smiling as Brandon helped her over a rocky ledge. And then came the motel. A small, quiet spot off the highway with hourly rates and no security cameras. Alan had timestamps, entries, and exits, always about 2 hours apart. 3 different occasions. She'd told me she was at a yoga retreat one of those nights. Another time she'd said she was helping Mia move a couch. There were receipts, too. Brandon had paid with a card that matched a gym membership in his name. Alan had cross-referenced it all. He was thorough. Almost too thorough. Each page made the pit in my stomach deepen. But it wasn't the images that broke me. It was the social media post. Alan had dug through Brandon's public profiles. On one of them, a private Instagram account that had somehow gone briefly public, there was a photo. Taken from the driver's seat of a car. His hand on the wheel. Rachel's hand resting gently on his, her wedding ring catching the sunlight. The caption read, "Some things are worth the risk." That was the moment. Not the motel. Not the texts. Not even the lies. That photo gutted me. Because it wasn't just cheating. It was mockery. It was her hand, a ring, in a post that treated my trust like a joke. A caption that told me this wasn't a slip or a mistake. This was intentional. She didn't just betray me. She flaunted it. The rest of the file blurred. My vision fogged and I had to sit down. I felt like the air had been **ked from the room. Every breath felt like I was drowning. I don't know how long I stayed there, staring at that folder. Long enough for the daylight to fade and the room to darken around me. Eventually, I printed the report. All of it. Photos, receipts, **TS. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do next, but I knew I needed it in front of me. Something physical. Something real. Because for months, everything about Rachel had felt slippery. Like I couldn't hold onto the truth no matter how tightly I gripped it. But now it was all right there. Paper and ink and cold, unfeeling evidence. I stared at the photo of her hand on his. I traced the edge of that ring with my finger. I remembered the day I slipped it on hers, our anniversary dinner at the vineyard, the candlelight, the way she'd cried when I gave her the custom engraving. Still. Always. And now she wore it while holding someone else. I wasn't angry. Not at first. I was hollow. Like someone had scooped out my insides and left only the echo of what used to be there. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat on the couch in the dark, the report next to me, listening to the quiet buzz of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the house settling. When Rachel came home, it was close to midnight. She tiptoed in as if that somehow made it less suspicious. She didn't know I was awake. I watched her from the shadows, how she paused at the door, slipped off her shoes quietly, and glanced toward the staircase like she was afraid I'd be waiting there. I stayed silent. I didn't want a confrontation. Not yet. She went upstairs. I heard the water run, the rustle of clothes being tossed into the hamper. Then silence. I waited another hour before moving. Picked up the report. Walked into her bedroom. She was asleep or pretending to be. I didn't care. I placed the folder on her nightstand. No note. No explanation. Just the truth finally laid bare. The next morning she didn't say a word. She sat at the table, pale, picking at her breakfast. Her hands trembled slightly. I didn't speak either. We went through the motions: coffee, dishes, texts to fake schedules. But the air between us was different now. Thicker. Unspoken, but undeniable. She knew what I knew. And I knew what she was. The mask had fallen. And there was no putting it back on. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things, accuse her in some dramatic showdown, or demand answers she wasn't brave enough to give. That's the part people don't understand. When betrayal finally shows its face, not hinted, not suspected, but confirmed with time-stamped photos and receipts, it doesn't always trigger rage. Sometimes it just unlocks silence. A different kind of quiet. Heavy. Focused. She didn't mention the folder I left on her nightstand. Not that morning. Not that evening. Not the day after. She carried on like we were still playing the same tired game, pretending we were fine, brushing against each other in the kitchen like we hadn't both drowned in the truth. She cooked. She smiled in these brief flickers. She even tried to kiss me once on the way out the door, like muscle memory kicked in. But I'd already made up my mind. The next Friday, I waited for the pattern. She said she was going to her regular evening class, the one that had become her favorite alibi. I told her I might go out for drinks with a coworker just to keep things even. She nodded almost too quickly, like she was relieved I wouldn't be home. She left the house at 6:10 p.m. sharp. By 6:30, I was changing the locks. It felt surreal, turning the deadbolt with my hands still shaking. I had already spoken to a lawyer earlier in the week, quietly, off the record. He gave me instructions, told me what to prepare. As a precaution, I'd removed some cash from our joint account. Not a lot, just enough to cover immediate legal fees and the locksmith. I wasn't stupid, I knew what could happen if she got ahead of this. While the locksmith worked, I packed. Not everything. Just the essentials: my documents, a few weeks' worth of clothes, my laptop, and every item that still felt like it belonged to me and only me. A framed picture of my parents. A baseball glove from when I was a kid. The watch Rachel bought me during better years, but even that felt tainted now, so I left it. The folder stayed on the table along with a second envelope. Inside it were three things. A printed copy of the divorce notice and signed but ready. The receipts from the private investigator's report. A handwritten letter. I didn't pour my heart into it. I didn't rehash what she already knew. I kept it clean. Cold even. It read, "Rachel, by now you've gone through the report. Or maybe you've ignored it, thinking silence would preserve your position. Either way, what needed to be said has already been documented. You made your choice. I'm making mine. As of tonight, you no longer have access to this home. Your belongings will be boxed and stored safely in the garage for pickup. Any attempt to enter the property will be considered trespassing. Do not contact me unless it's through legal channels. The rest will be handled in writing. T. I didn't sign it love, or even sincerely. She didn't deserve ceremony. By 8 p.m. I was gone. I didn't know where I was driving, not exactly. I just kept going until the lights of the city blurred into a quieter stretch of road. Eventually, I pulled into a small Airbnb I'd booked the night before. A modest cabin just outside of town, barely furnished but clean. No memories, no history. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. The next morning, my phone lit up like a crime scene. 6 missed calls, 3 voicemails, 14 texts. At first, they were confused. Where are you? Why are the locks changed? Is this a mistake? Then they shifted. This is insane. You're overreacting. Can we talk, please? This isn't how adults handle things. Then came the blame. You've been so cold for months. I didn't know how to reach you anymore. You shut down emotionally. What was I supposed to do? Maybe if you'd paid attention, this wouldn't have happened. Classic reversal. The kind of manipulation that masquerades as accountability. But I didn't respond. I turned the phone off and went for a walk. The cabin backed up to a wooded area. I wandered through the trail, my feet crunching leaves as my mind replayed everything. Moments I'd thought were harmless now stained with new meaning. Her late-night calls, the sudden rushes to the store, the way she'd pull away when I reached for her in bed. And now it all made sense. Not in a satisfying, I knew it kind of way, but in a sad, heavy, of course kind of way. The next day, my lawyer filed the paperwork. Rachel was served 2 days later. That's when her tone changed. No more sweet messages. No more deflection. Instead, she turned venomous. You blindsided me with this. After everything I've done for you? Really? You never fight for anything. You just leave. It wasn't an apology. It was defiance disguised as heartbreak. And I didn't bite. Every time she reached out, I responded with the same auto message I'd set up. Communicate through counsel. She didn't like that. I got **TS from mutual friends. She started telling people I'd been distant for years, that I had emotionally checked out long before she did anything. Some friends believed her. Others didn't know what to believe and quietly backed away. But a few reached out privately. Thomas, I don't know how to say this, one message read. But I always thought something felt off. I didn't know for sure. But Brandon? He used to come up in conversation a lot. Another one said, I wanted to tell you. I really did. But I didn't have proof and I didn't want to blow up your marriage if I was wrong. I'm sorry, man. I didn't blame them. People don't want to be the messenger. They don't want to be the reason a marriage fails. They'd rather stay silent and let the wreck unfold on its own. In the end, Rachel moved out without a fight. A friend of hers came by one afternoon to collect her boxed-up belongings. She didn't show her face, but she did send one final message before the divorce papers went through. My bags are packed. I hope you're satisfied. I hope this is what you wanted. That was it. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I messed up. Just bitterness. Like I had pulled the trigger on something she'd already stabbed to death months ago. The house was mine now, technically, but it didn't feel like home. Not yet. The first thing I did was strip the bed. New sheets. Different color. I threw out the lavender diffuser she loved. I repainted the bedroom walls. Small changes, but each one felt like taking back a little control. And then, without planning it, I found myself digging through the nightstand. I don't know why. Maybe I thought there'd be a letter, a confession, something. What I found was a ring box, hers. The original one from the day I proposed. She'd kept it. Inside was a note. Not long. Just one line. I don't know how I became this version of me. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry. I folded the note, placed it back in the box, and shut the drawer. Some people break your heart with chaos. Others do it quietly, in pieces, until one day you look around and realize they're already gone. Even when they're standing right in front of you. Rachel had left long before I locked that door. And this time I wasn't letting her back in. I thought the worst was over. The locks had been changed, the papers filed, and Rachel was officially out of the house and, supposedly, my life. I'd gone through the long, silent nights, the numb mornings, the headaches from too much thinking and not enough sleep. I told myself it would start to get easier now. Cleaner. Simpler. But the truth is, when someone detonates your world, the aftershocks don't stop just because you survived the blast. Exactly 1 week after the movers came to collect her boxes, I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. No text, just a link. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something told me to tap. The link opened to a social media profile, Brandon's, the guy from the SUV, the one whose hand Rachel had laced with her own in that cursed photo. His account had gone public, and now it was full of them. Him and Rachel, together, smiling, cooking breakfast on what used to be our patio. I recognized the latticewood trim I had built myself, the string lights we hung on a Sunday afternoon when we still believed in future summers. They were living in our old condo, the one Rachel and I had rented the first 2 years of our marriage, the place we called our starter home. filled with weekend brunches, Sunday laundry routines, and whispered plans for kids. They had moved in together, into that place. I scrolled with shaking hands. Photo after photo. Her in yoga pants with a smoothie in hand. Him shirtless, flexing near the mirror. Captions like, "New beginnings, black heart. Sunday reset with my favorite person." Nothing like building something real. Building something real. The irony stung so deep it didn't even burn, it froze. I closed the app and threw my phone on the couch. But a minute later, I picked it back up and checked again. It was like a sickness. Compulsion. I needed to know what else they had claimed. And it wasn't just Brandon's page. Mutual friends began messaging me. Not many. Just the ones who hadn't picked sides yet. "Hey, didn't know how to bring this up, but Rachel posted something weird. I thought you should see this. In case no one else tells you." Screensh *TS flooded in. Rachel at a hiking trail she once told me she hated. Rachel making pancakes with Brandon, using the same spatula we bought on a random Target trip 4 years ago. Rachel in the condo's tiny kitchen, wearing my old college sweatshirt. The one she used to steal when she was cold. In one photo, she captioned it, "Back where things finally feel right." That was the line that did it. Because it wasn't just about them moving in together. It was about erasing the past we had shared. Replacing it with a fantasy that made me out to be the mistake. And it worked. I started getting the subtle looks. At work. At the gym. At the coffee shop near our old condo. People who knew just enough to speculate but not enough to ask. One guy even said, "Man, I heard Rachel bounced back fast." Bounced back? Like I was the setback? I didn't respond, just nodded and moved on. But inside, I was unraveling. You can brace for betrayal. You can prepare for lies. But nothing prepares you for the second blow. The one that comes after the destruction, when you realize the world is moving on without you. And not just moving on, rewriting your story like you were never the main character to begin with. Some of our old couple friends unfollowed me. I noticed. Some even liked her new posts. One of them, Jenna, had the nerve to DM me. "I just want you to know, no judgment. Things happen. Life's messy." Messy. No. Messy is leaving dishes in the sink. Messy is forgetting a birthday or spacing on an anniversary dinner. This wasn't messy. This was planned. I remembered every moment now with a new lens. The late-night showers. The whispered calls. The way she started suggesting I work later or grab beers with the guys on nights I usually didn't. She was clearing space for him long before I knew he existed. And now she had planted herself into a life I helped build. Like she'd always belonged there. I thought about confronting them. I imagined it, anyway. Showing up at that condo, demanding my sweatshirt back. Maybe tossing a few harsh truths like grenades and watching the facade crack. But I didn't. What would it solve? What did I expect? That she'd fall to her knees and apologize? That Brandon would grow a conscience? No, they were too far gone. They had rewritten the narrative. And I was just a footnote now. The husband who never showed up emotionally. The guy who didn't fight hard enough. The placeholder until the real relationship came along. Still, I couldn't stop obsessing. For days, I scrolled through their pictures like I was studying a foreign language, trying to understand the expressions, the angles, the lighting. I looked for cracks, for signs she wasn't as happy as she pretended. In one photo, she didn't smile all the way. Her eyes looked distant. I zoomed in like it mattered, like it proved something. But it didn't, because whether she was happy or just playing happy, the damage was already done. My life had been hollowed out, and she'd repopulate hers like she never skipped a beat. The part that haunted me most wasn't the betrayal. It was the silence from the people who knew. People who had seen Brandon at her studio. Who had noticed them getting close. Who had probably whispered about it but never said a word. Not to me. I couldn't blame them, not fully. Who wants to be the person who says, "Hey, I think your wife's cheating on you"? But still, their silence felt like a second betrayal. I started deleting contacts from my phone. Not out of spite. Just clarity. If you stood by and watched my house burn, you don't get to ask if I'm okay when the ashes cool. I shut down my social accounts. Stopped checking stories. Stopped looking for cracks in their new reality. It didn't help. None of it did. Because the worst part wasn't losing her. It was realizing that she had been gone long before I noticed and everyone else had seen it but me. And now every photo they posted, every story they told was another version of the truth being buried. Another nail in the coffin of the man I used to be, the marriage I used to trust, the life I thought I had. They didn't steal my home. They didn't steal my memories. But they had stolen the dignity of my silence. And that hurt more than anything.